Two Russian warships were spotted off the eastern coast of Taiwan on Tuesday. Now, the island's defense ministry has said that it dispatched its own aircraft and ships to keep a watch after spotting the two warships. According to the ministry, the role of the enemy ship was performed by an R-20 missile boat, which from a distance of over 90 kilometers launched the Mosquito cruise missile into the area where the corvette was located. The missile firing area was close to the civilian navigation, and firing safety was provided by 15 warships and support vessels of the Pacific Fleet. Now remember, Taiwan has joined the United States and its allies in enacting wide-ranging sanctions against Russia following the invasion of Ukraine. But can Russia afford such military posturing, that too at a time when there's been an insurrection against Vladimir Putin within Russia? And not to forget how heavily the military is invested in Ukraine. On that note, let's quickly go across to my guest. I'm joined in by Brian Ho, who's the editor at New Bloom magazine and is a non-resident fellow at the University of Nottingham's Taiwan Studies program. Many thanks to you, Brian, for joining in. Now, what explains this unusual presence of Russian warships in Taiwan's waters? Because remember, the timing is what stands out. But first of all, what, in your opinion, could be the right explanation for such an unusual presence?
So this is still unknown, and I think there will need to be further discussion, particularly from the military, in terms of providing further information as to why they think they are there. This is not very normal, and it could be signaling. I mean, for example, signaling that Russia also has a stake in maritime traffic in the region. It could also be to signal alignment with China, for example. You do have Western countries, for example, the UK or France or Australia or Japan, also conducting maritime activity around Taiwan as a signal to China that they are also stakeholders in this. And so this could be the case with Russia, but it could also be testing out capacities or that Russia itself has its own ends. That's still unclear.
Brian, as per a Russian news agency, Interfax, the warships were performing tasks including a simulated naval battle to repel a missile attack. Is Russia helping China to prepare better, considering Taiwan is a significant Western ally?
So there's not been a lot of discussion between potential allies of China in the event of a Taiwan contingency. And to date, there has not been a lot of signaling from Russia regarding that. For example, that could perhaps work together with China in such a possibility. But it could be that we're at the start of this, and that this is what Russia intends to signal in the presence. So it is quite interesting thinking about the alignment of the two countries against Western powers or other powers in the region, because of the fact that does change how you would have to respond to them. What happens if the two potentially align? And so I think this is we could be at the start of that. It's too early, I think, to know whether that's going to happen going forward. But if the start of further activity, naval activity from Russia in the region in cooperation with China, then that could occur.
Brian, is China fearing further chaos in Russia after Wagner's uprising, and how could its fears potentially impact its tensions with Taiwan? How do you view the timing of this entire episode?
China usually prefers stable regimes in countries that is aligned with from the military government, if there is such one, or whichever country. That way you don't have to deal with that much forces contending for power. And so I think then the Wagner uprising is somewhat inconvenient for China, because China will then have to make a choice as to who it deals with. But it is quite unusual too, because there's much more discussion of the Wagner uprising that was allowed on Chinese media than you normally see when there is such an event or there's an outbreak of unrest in a country. And so I think that is also to be seen. I mean, Russia now, Putin will have to consolidate power because there was this challenge from Wagner. It's not clear if it's over, but there could also be potential challenges from the military or for generals. And it could be seen as a sign of instability behind his power. And so China, I think that is actually in a kind of difficult position as to decide what course to take. But I think for now, it would try to keep out of the fray and then decide how to intervene once there's a more clear outcome of this political unrest.
At a time when Russia's military is heavily invested in Ukraine, what explains this need for Moscow to involve itself in China-Taiwan tensions, Brad?
And arguably, it could even be to distract that there's domestic unrest in Russia. There's kind of tension going on, but the Russian military wants to project power still. And so, for example, carry out naval exercises or maritime activity, could be a way to show that things are operating smoothly in various domains for the Russian military. And so I think that's one possibility. And so I think it is also just the projection that is the key point here. What does the Russian military hope to project to other countries of the world with this activity? Just in hopes that to make it seem as though things are under control and it can still do this and it could still potentially intervene in other places. It's not as though it's completely just lost track of the plot and there's chaos internally in Russia and so it cannot do this.
All right, Brian, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for contextualizing that entire episode for us.